Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
It's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Hey, it's Leif Gamfert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldavar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Ruari Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your really frustrated host, Ruari, because nothing has been going my way today. And also joining me today is a very special guest. I have writer Will Morey, best known as one of the writers and writer's assistants on Dragon's Race to the Edge, a producer's assistant on Dragon's Dawn of the Dragon Racers and Lock and Roll Forever, a story writer and assistant editor on the Terminators, an assistant editor on Dragonquest, and a production coordinator on Transmorphers Fall of Man. How are you today, Will?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. It is a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, happy to be here. Happy to be here.
So getting right into my questions for you, Will. First of all, to start off with for a little background info, can you tell us how you got into writing?
Yeah. So my parents, my mom's an actress, and my dad, when I was growing up, he ran a theater and was a playwright. So I was sort of always interested in storytelling. But I wasn't interested in sort of getting into the family business of theater. But one day when I was way too young, I think I was 8 at the time, one of my cousins showed me the original Robocop. And I sort of finished that movie and said, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I went, I kind of was like, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to direct and write movies. I want to be Steven Spielberg. And then that eventually kind of narrowed down to, I want to write movies and write TV and be a writer. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always good to be quite ambitious, you know.
Well, when you're 8, it's sort of like all the options are in front of you. And as you get older, you sort of start to realize what your strengths are. And for me, it was, when I would direct student films in college, it was just, this is so hard and so difficult to sort of get your vision up onto screen that it's, not that writing's easier per se, but you don't have to worry so much about sort of the tangible details,
Yeah, definitely. And as you were saying with the strengths, as you get older and you figure out those strengths, then you're able to focus on them more.
Exactly. So for me, writing just seemed like a better fit. And I enjoy it, and it's always a challenge, but it's always fun, so.
Definitely. Now, getting into your work on Dragons, how were you originally hired to work on Dragons? Such a popular franchise, after all.
Yeah. So my roommate started working as the writer's assistant on Dragons when it was Defenders and Riders of Berk. So he started in the Cartoon Network era. Eventually, he moved on to the Turbo TV series as a writer. And so there was an opening for a writer's assistant just as the Cartoon Network series was wrapping up. So he put in a good word for me, and I met with Art and Doug, and I know you've had them on the show, and they liked me well enough and hired me as their assistant for the tail end of the Cartoon Network series. And as they were starting to gear up for the Netflix series, but it wasn't quite clear whether or not we were going to be on Cartoon Network or Netflix, And so I was their assistant through the Dawn of the Dragon Racers short that we made. And then eventually they said, all right, well, why don't you write it? And then when we were finally in full swing and going on to Netflix, they said, well, why don't you write an episode for us? And that was the Zippleback experience. And they liked what I did there, and sort of I wrote a couple more freelances, and then they said, well, why don't, and then one of the writers moved on from the show, and then they said, well, why don't you join and become a writer? So
that's very cool. And that, of course, led to you writing Strikeouts, didn't it?
Yep, that was the second freelance I did. I was still the writer's assistant when I wrote it, but I was, in the room and contributing ideas and pitching story ideas and things like that. So
that means in future seasons we can expect to see your name a lot more in the credits as one of the writers.
Right. Yeah, there will be. You'll see my name you'll see my name a lot more. So.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So congratulations on that. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, of course, with dragons, there's such a wide array of characters, but obviously some are more challenging than others to write for. So which of you found to be the most challenging and the most enjoyable, respectively, to write on the show?
So I have a bunch that I really liked writing for. I really loved writing for Vigo, the villain, and just his monologues could be a lot of fun, and sort of writing from the perspective of a villain who wasn't just in it to be villainous, but trying to, enrich himself was a lot of fun. But I loved writing for the twins. And Snotlout and Fishlegs. They were all sort of, the supporting cast was a lot of fun. Hiccup is the one who's harder to write for, because he's the hero and he doesn't get to be like really funny or sort of really out there. He can be snarky at times, but it's hard to sort of write him well and get him right, because he's very good, and but that's sort of the fun in writing him too, is finding the ways when he can be snarky and a little silly,
Yeah, definitely. When we had another writer from the show, Jack Thomas, on the show before, he also said Hiccup was the most challenging because, and he used the reason that it's hard to convince the higher-ups, not necessarily Art and Doug, but I mean the higher-ups in DreamWorks, that, heroes can have flaws, and that they want to give Hiccup some flaws, and Jack said that was one of the challenging things about writing Hiccup. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there were definitely times where, we'd want to base an episode around things where, Hiccup made a mistake and had to fix his mistakes, and eventually, sometimes we got them to agree to it, and other times they were like, no, Hiccup needs to be in the right here. It was always a balancing act with him, because part of also the problem with Hiccup in particular is that he is sort of a predetermined point where he gets to in the second movie, and where we were based in the, between the first and second. So there, it's how do you get to that growth without him being super flawed, and figuring things out. So it was a balance.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And of the episode you have written so far, obviously there's only 2, but it will be interesting to see how they compare to your episodes in future seasons when you start to have a lot more released. But of the 2 you've written so far, which is your favorite of those 2?
I really like. I love them both. The Zippleback experience was a lot of fun, writing just gags for the twins and doing sort of a fun, sort of over-the-top emotional thing with them. But Strikeout was near and dear to my heart, because it was sort of the concept. I came up with it, and Art and Doug really responded. Art and Doug and the other writers really responded to it, and it's it was also became a challenge. You know, you do these sort of a Thunderdome-esque episode, and you're like, well, that sounds great on when you just write it out as a sentence, but when you start building it into an episode, how do you make it not repetitive with, you know, multiple fights that don't just seem like it's just a lot of fighting? And thanks to Art and Doug and the other writers, we all kind of hit on the idea that, oh, this is kind of a toothless story, really. And that was fun. And then writing the twins as detectives was a blast. That was just so much fun to do.
Yeah, that's also one of probably the most disturbing scenes in Dragons for me, when Tough Nut is trying to flirt with the guard by accident.
Yeah, which was a TJ improv kind of thing. It wasn't in the original script, and I thought it was very funny when we got the voice track back. he did that. So.
That is brilliant. Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing he would improvise with.
Absolutely, yeah. And which is great. One of the great things for writing for Tough Nut and TJ Miller in particular is that he's got such a great comic mind that if he sparks to something, he'll just run with it, you know. So.
That is really brilliant. Now it'll be really great rewatching that scene and knowing that it was all improvised, like none of that was planned or scripted.
Well, yeah, I mean the Rough Nut flirting with the guard, that was written, and then but I guess when they got into the record, they came up with this just sort of, we're just gonna extend it, so you know.
Yeah, definitely. And also in regards to the episodes you've written, or you could do what Jack did and tease us about it being a future episode. Which of your Dragons episodes have you found the most challenging to write, and why?
It's a good question. I mean, they all, this is true of anything you write, they all sort of present their own challenges, you know, they're all sort of different. There's a Twins episode coming up that sort of had a struggle to make not repetitive, and you know, trying to, yeah, I mean, of the two that have been released, figuring out the climax and making the climax of Strikeout work was difficult. There are, you know, multiple things going on, and you trying to make the momentum fit and trying to intercut between three different things. You know, there's the dragon emotional story, there's Hiccup trying to escape, and then there's the riders coming in to get him. That was a challenging puzzle to work out, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you did it just like Jack did, a tiny tease about an upcoming season, so well done.
I don't want to. I mean, DreamWorks will murder me if I give away too much, but I also don't want to spoil the fans. So, you know.
Yeah, true. Well, you didn't say very much because, like, I mean, it does make sense with I mean, you didn't give away anything significant because, like, with the twins, it's tough because there's so many jokes with them that when it comes to doing their own kind of episode, you don't want it to feel repetitive to the gags that have been there before.
Right, and on top of it, you want to give it sort of an emotional hook and a through line, and because they're both insane, you can't. It's hard to kind of figure those out and what's different from what we've done before and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's a good challenge to have. It's not a bad problem, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you don't want it to be a bad problem. That would make things way too difficult.
Oh, yeah, you know.
Yeah, and in regards to the Triple Stryke and Strikeout, which you mentioned a few minutes ago, of course, in that episode, the Triple Stryke was being introduced for the first time. It was a new type of dragon. So I'm curious, how much of a role did you have in the dragon's design? Was there anything in particular that influenced how the dragon was approached?
So, I didn't really have a hand in the design per se. Pretty much before a season starts, the writers and I, we'd sort of come up with ideas for dragons. Some of them were attached, like story ideas kind of spun out of them, like the Buffalord. When we came up with that dragon, the story for it kind of dovetailed with it. Others, not so much. The Triple Stryke was one of those, which was, well, what about a dragon with 3 tails that it can braid together and slash people? I think initially we called it like the Triple Slasher or something, and that was not a very good name. So we renamed it. But so when it came time to my episode, and I asked Art and Doug if I could use this dragon, when it emerged in the script, I think I just wrote, it looks like a bat crossed with a scorpion. And the design team, when they got that, sort of ran with it and designed what it looks like now. So when I was thinking, it was just sort of, it's a dragon with, a bat with 3 tails. They added the pincers and everything, and I think it's a really cool design. It's very weird, and I like that. But I didn't give anyone notes on that. Art and Doug were the ones who would have done that. So,
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite dragons designs, though, from the TV show. So it's really interesting to know that you had put down, that was like a bat and a scorpion, even if you didn't intend that to be the kind of final design. Like, it's just interesting to know that insight.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you can't give away too much, but, I mean, this is something that, we can kind of assume from the ending of the episode, but I have to ask anyway, considering how Strikeout ended, will the Triple Stryke be returning next season?
How do I put this? I think I can say that he will make his return. I think that's all I can really say about it, but you will see him again. So,
well, that's good enough for me. Now, of course, as I've alluded to on the interview, and I don't want to take away from you, of course, you're your own guest, which is fantastic. But obviously, we did have Jack Thomas, another of the writers, on the podcast a few months ago, and interestingly, he said that production was ahead of schedule on the future seasons, and the episodes may be released in November or December of 2016. Obviously, that's not the case, because there's still no sign of the episodes, and I should know, because I'm hearing all about it on social media. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case, and there isn't even on the Netflix January 2017 schedule. That is out, and there's no dragons on it either. Do you know what the story is in regards to when the next season of Dragons will be released?
I really don't. I wrapped on Dragon. The writing finished on Dragons in October, and it takes, about 10 to 11 months for an episode to be completed. So I don't know. It's a good question. I would assume it'll be this year when we'll get the next season, but I really don't know. I really don't know.
Well, Dragons fans will just have to have quite a bit more patience.
They'll just have to wait. I know it's hard, but they'll just have to wait, especially because we ended it on such a crazy cliffhanger. So,
yeah. Yeah, which Jack even referred to as a false cliffhanger, and that says a lot when he wrote the episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's not here to defend himself, sorry, Jack. But actually, he did say that, so I shouldn't apologize.
Yep.
But anyway, my final question for you, Will, do you have any upcoming writing works or any other projects coming up that you would like to talk about?
Right now, I'm a free agent, so I'm just working on my own stuff and trying to find the next show that'll hire me. So, nothing I can really talk about in the works, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's really cool, but I'll definitely look forward to hearing when you do book something else. Now, we also have a few questions from some of our listeners and some of our website followers. Just a few for you in addition. So, the first two come from Stephanie Wittig. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Do you have a favourite season from the 3 seasons of Race to the Edge released so far?
Oh man, that's a really hard question. I love the first season. I love all the stuff of building Dragon's Edge and building it up. And I love the introduction of Vigo, and there's so much of each season that I really enjoy, and I don't know if I have a favorite. It's hard to say, because being in the writer's room for all of it, it's all of them have bits and pieces that are near and dear to my heart. So I don't know if that answers the question. I guess all 3. I like all 3. How's that?
That's really good, but you know what I just realised? That would have been the best and worst answer for that question at the same time. Is if you said, my favourite season hasn't aired yet.
Oh, there's some really exciting stuff coming up, so I don't know. That would be a good answer too, but like I said, I love all of them. I was involved with all of them, so it's hard to it's like picking a favorite child,
I wouldn't know. And her second question, now that there will be a total of 6 seasons instead of just 4, how much of an influence did that have on the plotline? Any big changes?
I'm trying to remember. No, as we kind of, when we were figuring out the seasons, we kind of had, when we thought we were only going to be 4 seasons, we had an ending, but we had like an opening for the next season and kind of what the next couple seasons would be. And when we got the order, we were able to explore that, but it wasn't anything that it didn't change anything drastically. No.
And the final question is from Lyra Dragon, and I bet you've known you'd be getting this question at some point, because I got the same question, like as 4 of the questions I got on the website, so you had to get it at least once. Will we see more Hickstrid moments in the 4th season of Race to the Edge?
I am not shocked by this. Dragon fans are tenacious and are very interested in Hickstrid, for obvious reasons, but I can't say much, but I will say that fans will be happy. So that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, but now they won't be happy with the wait. They
won't be happy with the
game.
Wait. But I think the wait will be worth it. So.
Okay, that's a very acceptable and well-reasoned answer. I just hope they agree. So that's all of my questions for you today, Will. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the podcast.
It's been great talking to you as well. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and hopefully I can talk to you again at some point.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I'll look forward to it. Thanks again for joining me on the podcast, and take care. Bye.
Bye.
So that was our interview with writer Will Morey. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. So that's it for this week's show. Make sure to check out our YouTube channels. Check out our website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/officialeverythinggeekpodcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comic Cast, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekcomiccast. Make sure to check out the hosts' YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/separatist-destroyers. Check out Will Morey on Twitter, twitter.com/willofmars, and check out channel 1138 where he broadcasts live from, www.channel1138.com. Geeks out, everyone.
Yeah, we are one of the few shows that they've ordered more of. Netflix plays it close to the vest with numbers and how you're doing, but they very clearly knew we were doing well enough that they wanted to get.
There's one called Midnight Scrum, which is a cool episode where a lot of bad guys are sort of out to get Hiccup. There's an episode called